John DeVersa Podcast.
What makes you special, what makes everybody special is that they're one of one. And, you know, nobody can do what you do, and you can't do what anybody else does. And that's the beauty of music, and we put it all together, and everybody has something very special to offer this music. And you know, I think our journey as artists and musicians is to just really find out what that is, and find out what your path may look like.
Hi everybody, this episode is with Ben Williams, bassist, composer, and one of the most prominent musicians today. Check out our conversation. All right, I'm here with Ben Williams. What a thrill to have you here.
Great to be here
on this podcast, and we've never met before, beside yesterday.
Yeah. I know it's. I've known of you for some time, so yeah, it's definitely a pleasure to be down here in Miami. You know, with some of my favorite people, and you know, meet the faculty here and the students, and you know, it doesn't hurt to just be in Miami outside.
No,
you know,
it does not. This is a beautiful time of year here right now too.
Yeah.
Hey, let me ask you, because you gave a master class here at the Frost School yesterday that I got to see, and you were starting to talk about your origin story a little bit, and from DC. And you know what I wanted to ask you first about is I mean, there's that rich history in DC that you're part of that lineage, but also it made me think, what was it like at home? Well, tell me about your family life and how that you know, brought you to, you know, the work ethic that you have today, the love that you have. You know, how does that all influence who you are?
Yeah, I mean, that's so important. You know, everybody's, you know, who they become is ultimately so informed by the household you grow up in. And you know, so I grew up in a house with my mother. It was just I have an older brother, so it was just the three of us. And you know, just kind of growing up in DC. You know, I was born in the 80s, and you know, kind of really just growing up in the 90s. DC was, you know, it was a rough place, you know, in a lot of areas. But you know, it was also a very beautiful and very diverse, you know, in terms of what you could see people do. You know, it was they used to call it Chocolate City. You know, it was very like predominantly black city, and you know, it was beautiful just to see, just to be like a part of that just rich cultural heritage in that city, and is so heavily celebrated there. And you know, in my house it was no different. You know, we listened to so you know, just a little bit of background about my family. My mom is she was born and raised in South Carolina, Rock Hill, South Carolina.
Wow.
Yeah, which is right outside of Charlotte.
Okay.
So you know, like a lot of people that move to DC and they come from the South, you know, you sort of know the history of where a lot of folks from, you know, moving to the northern cities and on the East Coast where they came from, you know, a lot of families come from the South. So, so on my mother's side of the family, they're mostly from like the North Carolina, South Carolina region. And, so yeah, my mother, she moved to DC when she was, you know, in her late teens, about 18. So, you know, she spent most of her life in DC. And that's where we were born and raised. And, you know, she's still in the same house that I grew up in. And it was just a very, a lot of, you know, there was always music playing. My family is, you know, I would say they're just very artistic. You know, I come from very like creative family. You know, everybody sort of has some kind of talent, you know, whether it's singing or playing an instrument or dancing, or like visual artist. whether they're professional or not, everybody kind of just has some sort of talent. So the family reunions and the Thanksgivings were very entertaining, to say the least.
Does that come through you too? The other types of mediums of art, the visual, the dance,
yeah.
Okay.
So actually, before I started playing music, I was pretty young when I started playing piano. But even earlier than that, I was doing a lot of visual art.
Mm-hmm.
I was really into drawing and painting, and even like doing sculpting and all that kind of stuff. So I was always just sort of drawn to like creative things, and that's how I kept myself occupied. And we asked my mother. That's how. I didn't really need much. You just give me a piece of paper and some pencils, and I used to like build little cities and out of my little action figures. I used to make like sets for them inside like these boxes, and I would have like a little town that they lived in. So I know it's very cute.
I want to go into too much of a tangent here, but first of all, who were those action figures?
Oh man,
that's important.
Let's see. There was a lot of wrestlers in there. WWF was big. So definitely some. Probably Hulk Hogan, Macho Man was in there somewhere. A lot of there was all the Ninja Turtles.
Right.
X-Men was popping. So
it's like early '90s, right?
Yeah. So like cartoons was a big thing. So a lot of action figures that came from those like cartoon characters. But it was just a very artistic and creative household. My brother is a big music fan as well, and actually turned me on to a whole lot of music. I think that's pretty common with the younger siblings. Of course, you're going to listen to your parents' music, but also your older siblings. You're very much influenced by their taste, because they're sort of like, just a few years older than you. And, whatever cassette tapes or CDs they're buying, you end up listening to that stuff too. So, a lot of hip hop, like Snoop Dogg and Tribe Called Quest and Biggie and all that kind of stuff. Of course, the R&B, like Bobby Brown and, obviously Michael Jackson, a lot of Prince, big Prince fans in my house. So I heard a lot of that music, and, all the just kind of classic soul music, from, Motown, all that good stuff, Diana Ross, Jackson 5, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, and it was just, the music was just a part of everything we did, so if I it's hard to remember like just being in the house without hearing music. You kind of hear it as soon as you wake up, and it just kind of plays throughout the day. It was sort of just the soundtrack to my childhood.
And all those artists that you mentioned, there's a lot of joy in those. Like there's a lot of love and a lot of joy. Even with the rap stuff, that like and the there's a lot of heart and purpose in all those musics that you just talked about.
Yeah.
Which goes in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the soul is in all that stuff, and when you become a musician and you start to actually learn the music that you've been hearing all your life, you start to connect the dots and really hear how much all of it's really connected and where it's all coming from. And it's just a beautiful thing. It kind of just comes full circle.
So, I remember I was just talking about this the other day. My dad had an 8-track. And so he had, there were 6 8-tracks in the car. And it was Songs in the Key of Life. Mm-hmm. 2 of them.
Right. The double disc.
And Willie Nelson's Stardust.
Okay.
You know that record?
I'm not familiar with that one.
He sings all these standards.
Okay.
In only the way that Willie Nelson could sing these standards. And it's like his band. And so it's like kind of some of it's not appropriate to what those tunes are, but it's still like amazing. And Earth, Wind and Fire, greatest hits. There was a Linda Ronstadt record.
Oh yeah.
You know, in other words, like those records are the ones like I'm still riding on those.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny when you think about just how, you know, not to sound like an old fogey, but like back in the day, you know, just how like different our listening experiences were. Just, you know, even from my childhood to now, like, you know, like you said, we, you know, like cars, you know, when I was coming up, there was like cassette, you know, cars had cassette players, and then eventually, you know, they had CD players, but you could only play like a cassette. It was like just one cassette, and whatever was in there, it would just repeat over and over and over and over and over and over again. And, you know, whether you wanted to or not, you like learned, you just knew every note and every little nook and cranny of those albums, because just by like hearing it like obsessively over and over and over again, and that stuff just never leaves you. It gets ingrained in you at an early age, and you remember it forever.
This is actually a total tangent, but you know Mark Ferber at all, the drummer.
Wait, what do I know that?
His brother Alan Ferber plays trombone.
Oh yes, I know Alan Ferber.
Anyway, Mark his dad had like a 1980 something Volvo.
Okay.
That had a cassette player in it, and when they bought the car, it had this cassette in there, and the same cassette is in the car, and it's like an Alan Holdsworth thing. And so like he's listened to that cassette like over and over, because that's the only cassette in the car. He's got the thing memorized.
Yeah, I mean, what better way to learn something than to just like listen to the same. I mean, it's you know, you just think about just how different that is from how we listen to music now. So like shuffle bass, you know, you just like, that was just totally impractical to do back then, to like just play one song from one album and then like pick another song from another album and a different artist. You know, that's how people consume music now. But you know, like that wasn't really like, you couldn't do that. And you just had to sit and listen to the whole album and then listen to it again and just over and over and over again until you got sick of it, and then you put another tape in the deck, or you know, another CD in a player.
Has that influenced how you learn music or absorb music? Now do you try and balance that?
Yeah, you know, and I feel fortunate to be, I guess, sort of the last of the generation that really got to experience that sort of like physical connection with music. You know, like going to the CD store and buying, you know, spending your money and buying one album and, you know, taking it home and just unwrapping it and looking through the liner notes and all the artwork. And it was such a meaningful experience. And, you know, I think I still, you know, obviously, you know, it's very different with the technology now with streaming, and, you know, you have the entire like history of music in your phone. And you're just walking around with like all the music that's ever been recorded basically over the last 100 years. You can just listen to it at any time. But, you know, it's like how much are you connected to the music that you're listening to? And that's something that I feel like I feel fortunate to have experienced how important that is as a musician, like really absorbing music, you know, not just listening to something once, just the repetition, how important that is to like absorbing the sound of something, absorbing the feeling of a certain kind of music. It doesn't take, it's not just like days, it's not weeks, it's you know, it's months and years of listening to this music. So knowing and understanding that, you know, that's how I know that's the only way I can really absorb music. Even today, I have to spend I know there's a certain amount of time that you have to spend with it.
You know what that makes me think of too is that you wear a lot of hats in your career, and you're world-class bass player, musician, you're a producer, you're a composer, you're an arranger, you're a band leader, and so all of those experiences and skills are going to make you listen to music differently too.
Yeah.
So that would be the question. How do those different hats teach you to listen to music differently?
Yeah. Well, all those things that you named, it requires you to know a lot of music. Just being a bass player, I mean, just kind of starting there, to be a good, even a good bass player, you have to know how to play a lot of different styles. You have to know a lot of songs. You have to have a decent repertoire of songs to be able to play, or else you'll just be sitting at home. And so, just kind of going back to what I was saying, just like what it takes to get there, to be able to to be able to understand R&B and hip hop and gospel, and what makes those different styles, like how do you get that feeling, how do you like achieve that? And it takes a lot of listening, it takes a lot of like absorbing, and just being like immersing yourself in those genres. And the same goes for being a producer. You have to have a very eclectic and broad sense of musicality, because it's being a producer, it's such a broad term in itself. Like, what is a producer? It can look so many different ways. The way Quincy Jones is a producer is very different than the way like Pharrell is a producer. Although their goal is the same, but like how they get there, their skill set is different. So, but the one thing I would say, any great artist, at least all the ones I've ever met, they all know a lot of music, and I'm sure you can think about all the greats that you've met and work with. When you get to meet them and you get to spend time with them, you're like, wow, they're like so knowledgeable. They're just like usually just very deep wells of knowledge and expertise. So, it's part of the job. It's you just got to know a lot of music.
I wonder if you found this too. I find that those really elite artists, ones that seemingly from the outside seem to do one thing, they're really specialized and they have, this clear-cut voice, and who they are in 2 seconds and all of that.
Yeah.
I think that the deception is that
that's all they know.
That's all they know. And then as you're alluding to, when you actually talk to them, they can talk Mozart, they can talk Cameroonian African drum, they can talk, they can talk everything. They know not just a little bit about everything, they know a lot about everything.
Yeah.
Almost universally, I found that.
Yeah. I was thinking about the time I got to spend on the road with Pat Metheny. I got to work with him for between like 2011 and like the end of 2014. So over those 3 years, probably did over 300 dates, touring all around the world. So, not just spending a lot of time with him on stage, but, on the tour bus and, just like you become like family with, when you spend that much time on the road with somebody. And the most valuable thing, obviously the concerts and the playing part of the gig was, is incredible, but what I really enjoyed was spending time with them off the stage and just kind of talking to the cats on the bus and like you said, like discovering like what just how deep their knowledge is and how broad their tastes are. And I mean, he would just we'd be talking about like Maxwell and like D'Angelo and like just like a lot of artists that maybe a lot of people just wouldn't even it wouldn't register to them that somebody like Pat Metheny would be into that kind of music. But for me it totally makes sense. It's to be that great, you just have to be a student of music, and not just a student, but like a true fan. And you just recognize just great music across the board. And he was absolutely that. And it was so much fun to just talk with him about just all these different artists, a lot of new artists that not just like people from his generation or like older music. He was up on a lot of the new up and coming artists as well. So I don't know where he found the time to just check everybody out, but it seemed like he just knew about everything.
Because it's important.
It is,
right?
Yeah. It's what we do. So
what a valuable insight just to see that, and someone that walks the walk and talks the talk, and and you mentioned so many other, seems like really special mentors in your life in the masterclass the other day. Terrence Blanchard and Rodney Whitaker and perhaps you could share just a couple of insights that they've given you that have stayed with you and makes you the person that you are today.
Yeah, man, I've been very fortunate, to play with a lot of my heroes. A lot of cats that I was listening to coming up in high school, and listening to all their records, and like just hoping one day that I'd get to just meet them, much less get to play with them and get to build a relationship with them. But yeah, there's definitely been several people along the way in my journey that have influenced me greatly, and in different ways. You mentioned Rodney Whitaker. He was my professor. He was my bass teacher at Michigan State University, where I did my undergrad. And, I was already, he was the reason why I went to Michigan State.
Yeah.
I was already at that point, really into the music, and, just, it seemed like all these records I was picking up that, be like Roy Hargrove, like, go through the credits and see who's in the band. So, it's Rodney Whitaker and Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, Wynton Marsalis. Who's in the band? Rodney Whitaker. It's Terrence Blanchard, Donald Harrison band. Who's in the band? Rodney Whitaker. So you start to get to know people before you meet them. Obviously this is like before social media. So, like you just see names and you hear them on records, and you get to know them that way. And, I was like, I can actually study with him. I can go to school and like learn from him. And I got a chance to meet him when I auditioned there. And, he was just a great mentor, not just as a musician, but as a man. Speaking of somebody who's just incredibly knowledgeable, I was just so impressed about how much just how smart and how knowledgeable about everything he was, not just music, but about like what was happening in the world and in the news and in sports and everything. It's like, these great artists are more often than not just very well-rounded people. And that was very eye-opening to me, just to see like, okay, this like being a musician is just not, it's not just about playing music. It's really about like your humanity and developing yourself as a human being, and being just a citizen of this world. So yeah, just very much influenced by obviously his playing as well, and just like that big sound, getting to hear that every day. You kind of have no choice but to just absorb all that. Stefon Harris was another, and still is a mentor of mine.
Yeah.
And, same thing, just very, just a brilliant person, just a brilliant human being, and very open-minded about music as well. Mm-hmm. And, that absolutely made its way to the stage. And one big thing that I learned from him was how to operate a band. A lot of times we think being a band leader is just about like, you hire cats and you have to like sort of direct and tell everybody what to do, and, sort of like have this like idea of being in charge. But what was beautiful about how he operated that band was just the amount of freedom and trust that he had in the band members, in Blackout, the name of the band, mm-hmm. and just how much he really like respected and valued what each one of us brought individually. Mm. And that's like what made it special. Mm. It's like there was no set list. There was, we probably rehearsed one time ever, and everything else is just like, it's happened on the stage. Mm. And just to see like, okay, there's, you start to understand like what leadership really is. It's not about, having all the answers and telling people what to do. It's about allowing people to be their best and just creating that environment for them. So, big shout out to Stefon Harris and, obviously Pat Metheny, the years I spent with him there. David Sanborn, somebody I've been working with a lot over the past number of years, about 6 or 7 years now. And, same thing, it's just like, there's this common thread, like, of these great artists that are just so knowledgeable and such big fans of music. We sit around and talk about like Kendrick Lamar and D'Angelo. He loves all that stuff, man. He's like a real true fan of all the music, mm-hmm. all styles of music. So shout out to Dave.
And it all goes in, right? It all goes in, and the people that are working with you, like how you're approaching the band leading, it's going to go into them, and this is awesome, amazing circle.
Beautiful thing.
And I've been following you, and your music is evolving and it's growing and it's becoming, more and more who you are, right? And I want to lead that question so you can speak to that as to how that humanity, how that evolution of you as a person goes into the music, and how conscious and aware are you of that as it's happening?
I think I become a little more aware of it as I get older, and you start to just it's interesting, you start to understand there's a lot of answers that you get about music just kind of naturally as you get older, and you start understanding yourself more. The more you start to understand yourself as a human being, kind of what makes you and what makes you an individual, it reflects in your music. And I think that's definitely been the case for me, just over the years, kind of taking all these experiences that I've had with all these great musicians that I've been fortunate to observe closely and to work with. And, what you take away from that is, okay, now that's who they are. Now who am I? What's my path? And once you start to realize that, you're good. You find your lane, and, you realize you're the only, what makes you special, what makes everybody special is that they're one of one. And, nobody can do what you do, and you can't do what anybody else does. And that's the beauty of music, and we put it all together, and everybody has something very special to offer this music. And I think our journey as artists and musicians is to just really find out what that is, and find out what your path may look like. And you discover it as you go along. It's not just that clearly. I don't want to make people believe that it's like you just have an epiphany one day and you wake up like, oh, this is my path. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. You're sort of, it becomes clear, but also you understand that you don't really know either. It's like, but you don't. And, that's the beautiful part about the journey too. And, there's a lot of things I'm doing now with my music that I wouldn't imagine I would have been doing, if you had asked me 5 or 10 years ago, if I was going to be doing some of the stuff I'm doing now. I'm like, I've been like, I did a whole album of singing, a whole vocal record. And
it's
I've been
beautiful,
like,
by the way.
Singing. Oh, thank you.
Really great.
Thank you so much.
Because you feel that purpose behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, just, exactly. If there's no purpose behind it, then it's ultimately going to be missing something. It's really about the intention of what it is you do, more than like the actual act of doing it.
And hey, let me tell you too, I have a lot of admiration for you having the courage to do that, because you have had this career to that point where it was very established in a certain way.
Yeah.
As a bassist, as a band leader, your music was, that's it. And you could stay there.
Yeah.
You could stay there and be very successful for a long time. And you said, it seemed from the outside, okay, I got to do this.
Yeah.
I have to evolve. And you didn't have to. It's a big risk, and it's also a no-brainer, at the same time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely, I know what you mean. And it's, thank you for that. It really means a lot, because it's, it's daunting. It's very, it's scary to do this.
Vulnerable.
It's very vulnerable. And especially singing, which is something I just kind of started incorporating into my music as well, just over the past, I guess, about 4 or 5 years now. But shout out to my man José James, who actually is responsible for me being taking that step.
Is that right?
Yeah. So another amazing artist who I've been fortunate to work with for the better part of over 10 years now. We were doing a tour. I think it was like 2018. He had a project. It was a tribute to Bill Withers, and we're doing a lot of touring that year. And I was working on a project called "I Am a Man." Well, actually, it wasn't even called that yet. It was, but the subject matter was already there. This was and still is a lot going on in this country socially, with a lot of just like police shootings, and it's just a lot going on.
All of it.
Even this is like even before 2020 and George Floyd, when things like really erupted. I kind of going back to my childhood. My mother was also, she worked in the House of Representatives for a number of years, and worked for several of the founding members of the Congressional Black Caucus. So she worked for Charlie Rangel, John Conyers, Ron Dellums, who are all these like very, very important members of Congress. And you know, important in the social movement. And, you know, so that was also a part of my upbringing as well.
I
you know,
see.
this like, aside from the arts, it was all, you know, it was always this like social consciousness that, that I got as well. So, you know, being an artist, you know, always felt the need. And even all the artists that I listened to growing up, you know, they all had something important to say. You know, their music it felt good and it was fun, but you know, they understood like their role and their voice in society and how important it was, and they spoke to that through their music.
Yeah.
So people like Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, you know, Prince, Michael Jackson, all these folks, they, you know, they let you know what was going on. You know, no pun intended. You know, I got to a point in my career where I felt it was important to like make that statement as well. So I started writing this music that was sort of in that spirit, kind of talking about, you know, some social issues and, you know, how it related to the Black community, how it related to me as an individual. So I started playing, you know, some of this music for Jose. I was just kind of making some demos, and these songs were already sort of, they were starting to lean in a new direction. They were a little more like song based, more than they were like sort of like instrumental, kind of from that jazz direction. Although it's always in there, but so yeah, you know, so I'm making these demos, kind of working on these songs, and I play some of the stuff for Jose. As you know, most musicians do, we always like sharing music and like, you know, what you working on? What are you working on? This is what I'm working on now. And I played him a few of the songs. He was like, "Oh man, it sounds great." He was like, "Who's that singing, by the way?" Because I was singing on the demos, and my intention was to give it to some other singers to interpret. But I was like, "That's me. That's me singing." He's like, "Oh man, you sound good. You know, you should do it. I think you should just do it yourself." So I was like, I don't know, man. I had to think about that, you know, because it's like it's such a completely different experience making music as a vocalist than playing bass. You know, we're literally like, it's like the opposite ends of the ecosystem, the music ecosystem. It's like, you know, we kind of go from the bottom to the top, like, and it's just a whole different world. And I'm also playing bass while I'm singing on stage. So just adding that element to it is just like, oh my God, this is, you know, I thought I knew what I was doing, but now I'm like, I gotta sort of like, yeah, it's that. And you gotta like sort of relearn, and you know, in a good way, you know, so you have to like really, you can't be on autopilot. I sort of have to like go back to the way I used to practice when I was in high school. I had to like practice everything really slowly. Yeah. And like, you know, do stuff over and over, and, you know, a lot of repetition just to be able to get that coordination. And so, yeah, you know, I eventually started to build up the courage to do it on some gigs. And then I built up enough courage to go in the studio and do a whole damn album of me singing. So that happened.
And the vulnerability of those words you're singing too.
Yeah.
Because that's coming from you.
Absolutely. So, yes. Yeah, vulnerable. I mean, that's really the word. It's a whole different, you know, for me, it was a whole, just another level of expression in terms of, you know, how I was communicating through music. And, you know, there's nothing more personal and vulnerable than the human voice, especially as an instrument. You know, it's literally coming from you. And on top of that, the subject matter is just, you know, it was very personal. And, yeah, so you know, for me, but it was something I felt like I had to do. You know, it wasn't. Yes, it was like an evolution. It was a new step, but you know, it's something I felt like I was being called to do.
Okay, talk about that. What is that? You have to do it.
It's, you know, it's that thing, man. You know, if you're, you know, when you're tapped in, you know, however you want to think about it, you know, whatever your sort of system of faith or spirituality is, you know, when you're tapped into that thing, you know, there's a voice, there's some guidance that you have to listen to, and you know, you realize that you have to sort of achieve this clarity to be able to be in that space, to just be able to like to let your life be guided by not just your own decision making, but by something that's like a greater force, that is a more knowledgeable force. You know, you just have to, you know when that tap on your shoulder happens, it's like, and it says go, you gotta go and do it.
And then every decision point, I guess you could say, there's a simultaneous surrender to that trust, and also an initiating thrust forward at the same time.
Yeah, I feel like everybody, whatever you attribute it to, I think everybody feels it. You know, everybody at one point several points in their lives, you know, they come to a crossroads where they know they have to make a decision that's maybe that may seem tough. You know, sometimes it's like to move to another city, or to, you know, to quit your job and like go on a whole nother path, you know, and it's scary, you know, like it's frightening to just jump off the cliff like that, you know, but you know, I'm always a believer. I've always been a believer in, you know, the reward being as big as the risk. So, you know, when you, I feel like the universe rewards solid decisions. You know, when you made up in your mind and you start to act on a decision that you've made, the doors will start to open. You know, it might not be right away, but you know, a way will be made for you. You just gotta keep going.
Yeah, and whatever you think those ways are, they may be different, but they'll open up because you took that risk and you made that courageous call to go forward. Yeah, you know, be ready for anything to happen beyond your wildest dreams. Yeah, right.
Yeah, life is something else, man.
You know, I know you recently moved out to LA, and I'm sure that signifies a new chapter. And I was just interested in this very moment. Yeah, you're following life and seeing what paths are open there for you. At the same time, I think in order to move forward, you have to have a really clear vision for what you're going after. You know, what that North Star is that you're going after, and then be ready to have it be a different star when it shows up. But what is that vision right now? What's the mission, maybe? What's the mission behind it, and then what's the vision that you're looking at right now?
Yeah, so I moved out to LA. I had lived in New York for about 14 years. So after I finished Michigan State, I went off to school. I did grad school at Juilliard, and I was there. I moved there in 2007, and you know, spent 14 years in New York. You know, an invaluable experience being in that city, just absorbing all of that. Just like it's hard to even describe what New York feels like on, you know, living there daily, but you know, it builds a lot of character. I'll say that, and you know, I think that's that's why people go there, you know, just to become great at what you do. So, you know, I think the years I spent in New York was definitely necessary, and, you know, absolutely served its purpose. But, you know, so my move into LA, it was definitely several factors. I've been looking at LA as an option even before I moved there, and then the pandemic happened, and I was still living in New York that first year of COVID, and it was like, I mean, it's hard to explain like what that, you know, just even thinking about it, it just feels like a crazy dream that happened. It's like, was that real? You know, did that really happen? But, you know, aside from just kind of being like really at the epicenter of what was really happening, you know, I know we're in Florida. It was like, it probably looked a little different down here, but I was in New York City and it was real. It was like, there was no denying it because it was like right outside. But, you know, so we had to take it very seriously, and, you know, we were really inside. Like, you know, if you were living in New York, it was like COVID was a very real thing. So I was just in my, you know, my life, like most musicians, was completely turned upside down. And New York City was completely turned upside down. You know, you think about New York City and it's like just the volume of people and everybody just kind of crammed together in these little tight spaces and just kind of being all up on each other all the time. And you go from that to being like completely isolated, but also being in New York. So I think one major thing that time did for me was gave me some a lot of time to think about what I wanted my life to look like, you know, what I envisioned the next step to be, and, you know, like what, you know, just kind of just really assessing like, okay, where am I? Like, what do I want to do? I think often as musicians, you know, before that point is, you know, you get so busy and, you know, just like you don't even have time to think about what it is you're doing. You're just so busy doing it and traveling and just playing all the time. And, you know, so I just had all this time to sit at home and really focus on, it's kind of like just where I am and where I wanted to go. So, you know, that decision to move to LA just came from just clarity. And I was like, you know, I think this feels like the time to do it. And I made that move. It was March 2021. And, you know, I just went out there and, you know, there was definitely a reason for moving there outside of just a lifestyle. You know, creatively, I think, you know, as you kind of see just over like recent years, you know, a lot of my music making has, you know, has been spreading in different directions. So outside of just being a bassist, you know, kind of focusing more on being a composer and also like producer and songwriter. And, you know, I knew LA was going to be a good place for that, you know, to sort of like explore that, that side, tap into that network. You know, there's LA is it just offers a different set of opportunities that I feel like that was appropriate for me to be there. And yeah, I moved, and you know, it's happening. I've been doing a lot of cool things. I've been, you know, producing some records, doing a lot of stuff in the studio. Actually, a lot of my friends from New York end up moving to LA anyway. You know, it was like the same thing happened to a lot of people where they were like, we're going to get out of here. Like, where are we moving? And so a lot of us just, you know, kind of in bulk, just kind of moved out to LA. Yeah. So a lot of my community that was in New York, they're now in LA, and great. It's beautiful, you know, where we all kind of like celebrate this new chapter together as a new community in LA. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and you know, just staying busy.
You know, one really wonderful insight that I was thinking about as you were saying that is having the time to find clarity to develop a new vision, right? Because a lot of times when we are so busy, sometimes we're busy with things that were the dreams from 10 years ago. And, you know, and you've created all of that, and it's great, and you look at it and on the surface and it's like, this is everything I want, but yet I have that itch for what's the next thing, and there's no way to really get there until you have the courage again to remove some of those things out of the container so you can actually sit still and say, okay, it's time to recreate now.
Yeah.
And you know, in this case, it was created for you to have that time. But sometimes we have to figure out how to do it ourselves.
Yeah. So I'm not asking for another pandemic, by the way.
Yeah.
I get it. I got the point. You know.
Fair enough. Well, I am really, really happy for you to have found this new thing, and I know you're working with a lot of folks that are good, dear friends of mine out there, and look forward to seeing those collaborations.
Yeah, LA is great. You know, it's that, man. That weather is a real thing. You know, I know y'all know down here, man. Like being in a place with nice weather, it's like I spent 35 years freezing my ass off during the winter, so I don't miss. You know, people ask me like, don't you miss like, you know, the seasons changing? I'm like, no. I'm like, I can go fly somewhere if I want to see some snow now, but
you've paid your dues.
Yeah, I'm sick of walking through it every day for 3 months out of the year.
Well, listen, I would love to get to play a tune with you here.
Yeah, let's do it.
I was thinking about this, Ben, too. It's like, okay, we're gonna play a tune, or we like, and I always hate that part where, what do you want to play? I don't know. What do you want to play? You want to play that thing? Okay, right. Yeah, I know that
the
thing.
Jam session conversation.
Like, yeah, exactly. And I was thinking, what if we just played? And
beautiful. I
and
love it.
with like no more set, just like we just met each other yesterday, and so let's give ourselves the space to find each other.
I love it.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's try it then.
Yeah, let's do it.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Much gratitude, everyone, for checking out the podcast. Please just subscribe and follow and like and add a comment, as it really helps us expand and grow and keep us all connected together. So I appreciate it very much, and I send you much, much, much love. I'll see you on the next one.